For many women, we disconnect from our feminine energy for a variety of reasons. But in this episode, we're going to talk specifically about the divine feminine and the wounded feminine energies so that you can begin the process of reconnecting back to that feminine energy that serves you at such a high level. Stay tuned to this week's episode of the Reinventing Thyself podcast. We all have situations, experiences, and moments in our life when we know deep at our core we have to do something different. We have to pivot. And regardless of how big or small that pivot is, it requires us to change something in our life. And that change can feel really uncomfortable. However, it is that change that is creating something entirely new. And it is that newness that creates a very different way of life in one area or multiple areas of our life. What's this all about? It is all about reinventing thyself. My name is Michelle Shutter, and I'd like to welcome you to Reinventing Thyself. I am so glad that you joined me today because it is here that we'll move beyond our old self, our old identity, and that trailer of garbage from the past that we like to pull into the future, but really need to ditch that hitch. It is here that we'll move into that place of reinvention and embracing the newness of it all. Are you ready to step into reinventing thyself? Because guess what? It is never too late, and your time is now. Let's get started. Hey, welcome back to this week's episode on the Reinventing Thyself podcast. This episode 42 on divine and wounded feminine energies is really going to be an eye-opener for you and create some new awareness because there are so many women that have disconnected from their feminine energy, and it's really time to bring that back into balance. Now, I have to tell you what I did. Last week, I recorded both of these episodes. So this episode 41 is all on divine and wounded feminine energies, and episode 42 is all on divine and wounded masculine energies. But for whatever reason, when I recorded those, I only did the wounded side of each energy. And so when I was ready to post them and get them out, I looked at my planning sheet and I was like, oh, I didn't include any divine energies for either one of them. And looking at my schedule of what I have scheduled to go out and what I want to record, there really wasn't a time to fit both divine energy for the masculine and divine energy for the feminine as separate episodes. So I decided rather than posting those episodes, I was going to re-record them. And so they're coming out just a tad bit late. But the great thing is we're going to have both divine feminine energy and wounded feminine energy in one episode, and divine masculine energy and wounded masculine energy in one episode. And so these episodes are going to piggyback each other. So when you're done listening to 41, make sure you grab 42 and vice versa. So let's talk a little bit about these energies. As I had mentioned in episode, I believe it was 37, where I did an introduction to both feminine and masculine energy. Energy is everything. Okay, so let's just really quick do a recap of that. Energy is everything, both physical and non-physical. Everything is energy. And there is a specific question that you can even ask yourself to figure out if you are your core essence is feminine energy or masculine energy. And that question is, would you rather be cherished or respected? Now, don't overthink it. Whatever pops into your head, generally for the most part, if you choose to be cherished, your core essence is feminine. If you choose to be respected, your core essence is masculine. Now, I also want you to keep in mind that these energies are not gender specific. Even though feminine seems to be more like a woman, masculine seems more like a man. They are not gender specific. Both males and females experience both types of energy at any given moment. The goal in all this, though, is to have some balance, some fluidity, some harmony between both of these. So what I want to do in this episode is really to give you some characteristics of what divine feminine energy looks like and what wounded feminine energy looks like, so that you create some awareness and you get to choose how you want to show up, what energy you want to use to serve you in any experience, situation, relationship, any area of your life. So let's talk first about the divine feminine. Now, when we think of feminine energy, it's flowing energy. You can think of it like as an ocean. There's always movement with the feminine energy. It is a very trusting energy. It is, that's where our creativity comes out. It's playful. It's loving, nurturing, assertive. It also allows us to be very vulnerable at times, very authentic to ourselves. We tap into our heart in this energy, and the heart definitely trumps the mind. So there's a lot of expansiveness that comes out of our heart. It is very unconditional love in a sense. It is also receiving. The feminine energy is also about receiving, and that can be very challenging for some women because, so many times it's, give. But when you are truly in that divine energy, you are receiving. There's a lot of compassion and empathy that comes out of this. This is where you just are in the flow, okay? As a female, that is just something that you are very grounded in. You are in your power when you are in this feminine energy. Now, I did mention receiving. There's also just a great component of giving in this feminine energy. But I want to make note that when we are in our feminine energy, that is where creation comes from. That is the beauty of this feminine energy. Now, when we talk about those characteristics, they are very high on the emotional guidance scale. They are very high energy level. If you've heard me talk at all about any sort of energy levels, we are tapping into levels, 4, 5, 6, essentially 7 when we are in our divine state. Now, over time, and things happen that disconnect us from that divine state and bring in almost a wounded part of our energy. And when we go into that wounded energy, it's unhealthy. It is not sustainable. And if we do sustain it over time, things start to break down in our life, whether it is, us physically or relationships or some area of our life seems to break down. That wounded part of us also comes from the ego and is very fear-based. And it almost seems, though, which is really interesting, that it's a conditioning of modern lifestyle. And when I'm talking about wounded, I'm talking about both the feminine and masculine energy. That whole area of wounded almost seems like we are conditioned to be in that space. Some characteristics of that wounded feminine energy are, where we become very needy. We essentially create in that divine, but then we destroy it in the feminine wounded. We feel unappreciated. We're powerless. There's a lot of passive aggressive that comes from us when we're in that wounded state. We're very attached to outcomes and we're afraid of loss. A lot of times we self-sabotage ourselves, we sacrifice ourselves, and we prioritize others over ourselves. And we don't put boundaries on ourselves, which then leads to this whole space of, oh my gosh, I'm self-destructing. It's almost like I'm in a victim state. And sometimes I don't even like to use that word victim because it feels very triggering, but it's victim from the sense of being almost lethargic and not engaging and being in this state of just not wanting to move forward. Sometimes we can even be manipulative in this state. And what almost coats it all is this place too where we feel like we have to be this superhero and play martyr. And it's a very interesting state. And so you can see in both the characteristics of the divine feminine and the wounded feminine energy, they're very different. But yet at the same time, we can't transform an energy that isn't serving us without being aware of the energy that we are using at any given time. Now, when we're in that wounded state, we're in the lower energies of the emotional guidance scale. We're in that level 1 and level 2 state where, again, we feel powerless, and sometimes we're a fighter because, we might manipulate things or become passive aggressive. But again, over time, we have to make that decision of, is this serving us? And many times we have a lot of resentments that come up and judgments, a lot of limiting beliefs. We're very critical. And another characteristic, which is, this was always a light bulb moment for me, was that whole piece of perfectionism. That perfectionism even also is that space of being wounded. Now, the one thing we want to remember is it isn't necessarily our fault that we are operating from these wounded states because of the conditioning over time, right? And that the wounded states sometimes start to feel very comfortable for us, which is challenging to challenge it, to want to step out of it. However, it is our responsibility to heal that, to move through that, and shed some light on those energies that just are not serving you at a high level. So what I would offer you to really think about and reflect on is, given some of the characteristics that I gave you in terms of, being in your divine feminine energy, whether it's, compassion or confidence or playful, being creative, pick one or two of those characteristics and really identify, what are you doing in your life, or where in your life do those characteristics really shine through? Where are you really in your feminine energy? And then also do the same for the wounded feminine energy. Like, where do you become in a space where you feel powerless? Where do you start to self-sabotage yourself? Where do you sacrifice yourself and prioritize others? Where do you maybe have this insecurity or feeling needy or perhaps even manipulative? And again, you have to get honest with yourself to really move forward in a way that serves you. Keep in mind that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transformed. And you can't transform that without having awareness on it. Now, one of the things that I want to offer you is that if you are a woman, if you are a mom, if you have a career or just a whole lot of things on your plate, know that it is very easy for you to become disconnected from your feminine energy. When you are in the heat of raising kids, that is a lot of masculine energy that you are using. And so it's easy for you to disconnect from that feminine space. That has been a big challenge for me, because it was very easy to operate in the masculine energy, which again, I'm going to talk about in that next episode. So be sure to listen to episode 42 so you can kind of bring this all together. But just know that if your core essence is feminine, you have to do some things in your days, your weeks, your months, your years that allow you to utilize and tap into that feminine energy. Because if you don't, over time, it's burnout, it's overwhelm. It is this place where you just want to power down and not ever power back on. And that is something that you really want to be aware of. And again, you can't create that awareness unless you do some of the work and really get honest with yourself by looking at these characteristics. So Another great exercise for you to do is to take any area of your life, whether it is, business, money, your career, relationships, kids, marriage, health, whatever it is, and look at what is happening in those areas and decide, do I operate more from a wounded state or a divine state? And when, again, I'm in that wounded state, what is happening that I engage in those wounded energies versus divine energies? And then also look at, okay, in that specific situation, I was operating in my divine energy. Well, why? What was happening there? And again, a great way to do that is just to pull out a notebook and start jotting things down and reflecting on that by getting that out of your head and having some space. So when you are able to create that awareness, right, that's number one, you also get to shed light on the energies that are wounded that do not serve you. And when you are aware of those, that is when you can come from a space of taking action to do something different that serves you. And when you begin to take action on those things, you start to move more into that empowered space that really is aligned with what you want and who you are. And it really is aligned with those feelings that truly make you feel good. Because I can tell you, when you're in that wounded state, those feelings, although they may feel comfortable, are not the ones that necessarily light you up, fuel your soul, and make you feel good. So that's what I wanted to share with you today in terms of the divine and wounded feminine energies. Now, keep in mind that this is a lot. This is a lot to take in. And these energies are exactly what we are going to really talk about more, discuss more, and really allow us to create some space to move into that divine and those higher levels of energy. And if that is something you want to participate in, make sure you go to the lifecoachingclassroom.com so that you can be on the list to let when the doors open to that classroom. We will be doing a group program, which will be really great. And founding members will have a really sweet deal that will be a lifetime deal for them. So again, if that is something that you are interested in, you're going to want to go to lifecoachingclassroom.com. So that was it for episode 41. Stay tuned for episode 42, where that one will all be about the divine and feminine, or the divine and wounded masculine energies, since we covered the feminine. So my wish for you is that you move boldly and bravely through your new beginning and beyond. Until next time. Well, what are you waiting for? Whether you've pivoted and are unsure, or you're on the verge of pivoting, there is no better time than now for you to begin. Want to know why? Because if it wasn't the right time, the pivot wouldn't have shown up. And to get you started, I have got 3 shortcuts to reinventing thyself. Just head on over to www.reinventingthyself.com and you can download it there. And don't forget to message me with the shortcut that resonates with you the most. One last thing, I know you and I are not the only ones that have leaned into the pivot. Be sure to share this with others so they can be supported too. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you for supporting me and sharing this message. Until next time.